Before I talk to you about what we're up to at ShopDirect, just a quick introduction in terms of my background. So, Jon Rudoe, as Ruth said, look after retail technology and data at ShopDirect. My background, I was a venture capitalist and a management consultant, so big companies and small companies. I spent 5 years at Ocado, looking after the customer-facing side of that business, so I guess a small company that became a bigger company. Then 6 years at Sainsbury's, leading online and then technology, so a big company. And I guess I've spent most of my time, on the knife edge between old and new, and then I guess latterly the transformation between the two, which is quite an interesting space. So that's me. And before I get into what we're doing in the transformation sense, let me just tell you a bit about ShopDirect, just for context for those of you who may not know much about the organisation. So it's an old organisation, more than 80 years old. And the history is in catalogue businesses, as you see on the left. ShopDirect was formed out of the merger between the Gus Home Shopping and Littlewoods businesses. So we had catalogues, we had shops, and that's quite a big journey from there to actually the second largest pure play internet business in the UK. Somebody asked me the other day, actually, oh gosh, I haven't been into a Littlewoods shop for ages. Well, that's because they were sold more than 10 years ago. They're now Primarks. But that's an important transition. You know, we've gone from, I guess, sort of 5 years or so ago, about 3/4 of the business came from catalogues. Now 3/4 of the business comes from mobile and tablet. And we used to deliver literally tens of millions of catalogues every year. Now we deliver none. So an absolutely massive transition. In terms of the structure of the business and the way in which it serves customers. And we're absolutely now on that journey of kind of mobile first. So everything is designed for mobile. Actually, smartphones are now over half of our business. So that gives you a kind of sense of the context. So, you know, we are an internet business, retailer, and a lender as well. I'll come talk to that in a moment. But absolutely focused on that kind of digital, mobile-first, smartphone-based generation, which is a long way from a legacy catalogue and store business. And how have we done that, and who do we focus on? I guess it's worth talking about the customer up front because, as Ruth said, actually in the framing, this is all actually about the customer, and everything that you do and everything that you do in transformation and transition has to anchor around that customer and your understanding of who that customer is. So who is that customer that we've been serving? Well, we are a retailer and a lender. So ultimately, this is a customer who is open to the idea of credit, particularly enjoys the interest-free options that we deliver. Every customer has a choice of an interest-free option in our business, and that's a huge driver then to the retail side of the organisation. She's a 25 to 45-year-old woman generally, not exclusively. Focus is on fashion, but she's not a fashion leader, she's a fashion follower. Effectively, we're delivering her a department store offer online. And that's the customer. And that picture there is our stylized view of our customer, so you'll see her through the slides. So that's a bit of background about who we are, what we do, who we serve. And I'm going to talk to you today about transformation. And one of the first questions I often get on transformation is, well, aren't you done? You know, you've been through this massive transformation. You know, you've gone from stores and catalogues, and you don't have stores and catalogues anymore, and very few organizations have made that transition. You know, we are one of the few businesses that is kind of digital to their customers, that was not born digital to their customers. And I guess there's a sense from the outside that, you know, we might be done. We might have done our transformation. And we haven't. And we talk a lot about continued transformation inside the business. So why is that? I guess a good way I think of expressing that is to say that we've become digital on the outside, but we haven't yet become digital on the inside. And so when you hear the talk about technology monoliths and agility, we haven't quite made that transition internally. So we present digitally to our customer, but we don't yet operate digitally, and we don't yet operate at that kind of speed and pace. And there are several dimensions to that. So technology-wise, and you saw in some of the questions earlier, we still have We still have some monoliths. We still have some legacy technology. We've got some very modern technology as well, but if you were to come and look at the buying systems, we've been buying products from suppliers for 80 years. Systems aren't quite that old, but there are some areas of the estate where actually our technology is quite old. Org structure, absolutely, we're still still got the silos, still got the kind of functional ways of working, and then not yet kind of customer-centric enough, and that sort of turns out in talent. We haven't fully modernized all of the talent that we need. We haven't got all the engineers and data scientists and all of that sort of stuff, and we aren't yet fully customer-centric and as customer-first and customer-fast as we could be. And this is where we feel it, So as an organisation that's never satisfied, and I don't think any organisation should ever be fully satisfied. If you work for an organisation that's fully satisfied, that's probably a bad sign. We don't move as fast for our customer as we would like to. And when you look at some of those companies that were up on the slides earlier, the FANGs or the GAFAs or whatever the latest acronym is for the Facebooks and Googles and Amazons and so forth, we don't move at that velocity yet. We're getting better. But absolutely, we could move faster, and the market is absolutely moving customers' expectations at warp speed. So there's still plenty to do, plenty to get after, and I'm going to sort of talk a little bit to that in the coming slides. So, what are we up to? What are we doing? What does continued transformation actually look like? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this sort of circular representation here to talk a bit about each of the aspects of transformation as we see them. One of the things that's kind of important, I think, to note about this is that they're all interlinked. We talk a lot internally about the fact that actually no one part of this wheel actually delivers transformation. You can't just say, well, we've changed our technology, we've done technology transformation, therefore we're done. Actually, the whole thing has to work in concert. So whilst I agree with Ruth's assertion that it doesn't matter where it starts, absolutely the whole organisation has to start to change and has to start to buy in to the way in which you're going to drive that change. So let me start, however, with technology, and this is to a certain extent somewhat circular, and I'll talk a bit about where we are on technology. There's a couple of things to mention. In our business, and I think many businesses, it really does start to be all about data and all about the understanding of the customer that you drive through data. So a lot of our journey from a technology standpoint is actually about faster and better utilizing the data that we hold and we have, and absolutely doing it in a responsible way. If you think about what we do, we're a lender, and obviously lending decisions are better done with data and better access to data and better understanding of data and better real-time understanding of data. And then obviously we're a retailer, and retail is I think, better done with personalisation, and that personalisation is absolutely fueled by data and the understanding and the utilisation of data. So a lot of what we've been focusing on is effectively bringing that information to bear and bringing more of it to bear quickly, more real-time, and more, I guess, use cases of that information to help understand customer behavior and serve up things that are useful to that customer. So that is a big focus, and that kind of agility and flexibility and movement of data is a big focus in terms of that underpins all of our technology change. It's not just that, however. We'll go back one. It's also the way in which the technology operates. So I talked a bit about monoliths and technology, and one of the signs for me is how often you can change something without that change stopping something else from happening at the same time. And we're absolutely on that journey. We're on that journey to getting independence of technology. And to make sure that actually you can change your technology in one area of the customer experience without having to sort of wait in another area of the customer experience. And I guess that for me is a measure. How often, if you want to change something in one part of your organization, one part of your customer delivery, customer journey, however you want to frame it, does that stop you changing something somewhere else? And that's all about putting the technology at the center of what you do and then organizing the structure of your technology around that customer. So there's a big reason why the customer is in the middle of that diagram. Now, it's not only for technology's sake, why that customer is in the middle of the diagram, and these things, as I said, have to work in concert. It's also about the organization structure. One of the things I find really interesting about organizations is that most people who work in an organization can, in some sense, draw the organizational structure of their business. Just think about that mentally. Do you have a map in your head? Oh yes, there's the CEO, and there are the people who work for the CEO, and there are the functions. And most people can actually draw that, if you ask people to draw their organization. What always strikes me as quite interesting is that very few people can actually draw what the organization does for their customer. And that, for me, is a much more important diagram to understand than reporting lines. So one of the journeys that we're starting to go on is this journey of kind of org structure versus, I guess, operating structure, whatever you want to call it, and recognizing that there's a difference between pure reporting structure and an actual the way in which workflow is controlled or operated and so forth. And this is quite a big change for an organization. Because if you think about, managers, think about the questions that you ask people in interview. How many people do you lead? And people say, I lead 100 people. Do they all report to you? Is it a sort of interesting question? But, well, some of them do and don't. Those lines are really starting to blur. And I think that's a very interesting concept. And when I talk a bit about leadership changes, that's one of the big areas that I think organizations have to start to adapt to. That's an increasingly a redundant way of thinking about organizational structure. And we're not immune to thinking about organizational structures, but over time we're starting to blur the lines between how organizational structures work and how work is actually managed and controlled. And that's ultimately to organize it around the customer. Now, I think it used to be, particularly in retailers, that actually traditional functional org structures were good ways of organizing your business. If you think about how a traditional store-based retailer operates, once you've built the shelves, actually the shelves don't move. So it's very easy then to make a break in your organization and have another team, one team manage where the shelves are, another team put stuff on the shelves, another team manage the operation of the shop around the shelves. That distinction sort of completely disappears in digital retail because the shelves are literally moving every second and are different for every customer with every single search. So that kind of logical functional boundary doesn't make quite as much sense. So that's absolutely a thing that we're talking about in this area and continuing to evolve. And the more that we can align teams around what they do for the customer rather than functions, the better. And you've got to have great people in order to do this. This is kind of a no-brainer, right? The slide on talent, but it's absolutely critical. And I guess there's two sides to this for me. One side is new talent, but there's another side which is existing talent. New talent is clearly a thing. 5 years ago or so, we had, I think, one data scientist. Now we have a whole team of data scientists. We have tens of data scientists, and we had to go find those people. We had to go find them. We had to recruit them, and we had to make our organization exciting enough and engaging to them, given the number of choices that these people have. And that's absolutely about relationships with universities. That's about telling the story. That's about engagement. It's also about location. We've got data scientists in Liverpool, which is where our headquarters are, but we have a London office, and that's absolutely given us more access to that kind of scarce talent, engineers, data scientists, and so forth. So that's a huge piece, and it's why engagement is so important. What do you mean? Why would you work for us? Because actually, I completely agree with what Gerd said. I don't think people are motivated by doubling revenue for X, Y, Z. They're actually motivated by, in our case, playing a part in customers' lives. Making good things easily accessible to more people. That's how we talk about our mission to, bring our product to a customer, enable them to spread the cost. That's actually something that people talk about, not numbers on a spreadsheet. So you've got to really think about that in the war for talent. The other thing, of course, is existing people. And when you start on this kind of transformational journey, I think some people can get very scared. Oh my God, I'm not a data scientist. I'm not an engineer. They're going to hire loads of those and get rid of these. And clearly there are changes in skills that go on, right? And it's quite hard to learn some of those things. One of the things that I'm very fond of doing when I'm talking to the teams is asking them, how many of you have been in the organisation more than 5 years? And a good chunk of people will put their hands up, if I'm sort of talking to the teams that I look after, which is surprising, actually, if you think about the areas of the business that I'm responsible for. But the second question, I think, is the killer question, which is, and how many of you have had a change of job or role during that time? And then, of course, invariably, everybody puts their hands up. And, of course, when you go on this journey, it's not just about bringing in new skills. It's also about developing the skills and the ways of working and the confidence of the people that you already have. And obviously there's a selection bias in there. The people who wanted to change and have gone on the journey are the people who are still working with us. But I think that's absolutely critical to remember that transformation doesn't just happen by bringing in new skills. It happens by changing the way in which your current teams work. So then let's talk a bit about, I guess, all the other stuff that goes around that. And I've kind of bucketed a few things here that you think of in a different way. And I'm not going to spend too much time talking about things like governance because I think they're quite obvious. The finance team needs to recognize that these are products, not projects, and actually we're going to deliver value every couple of weeks through releases and sprints and so forth. And there's one of my peers is very keen on where's the Gantt chart. It's like, well, by the time we've written the Gantt chart, it'll be out of date. But if you go to that showcase every Thursday afternoon or every other Thursday afternoon in our business, you'll see what's happening. And that's the best way to get on top of it. But there are a number of things, actually. So we've talked about, the customer. And we spend a lot of time obsessing about telling our organization, helping our organization understand the customer. We have customer labs. We bring customers in. We do sort of video-based research. It's all about understanding who that customer is. We think a lot about where we work. So the location, this is an organization that's opened a gym and a wellness center. We have a juice bar. I'm reliably informed that you can get your nails done in our office. I haven't done it myself yet. But these things are all really important. It's really important to set the right sort of environment, I guess. I've talked about the engagement, and tools and tech is a big thing. One of the questions I always like to ask, hire an engineer and then ask them if they can actually do their job. Because when you start, actually, I can't get on the network, I can't do this. And this is, it's surprising how important some of these little things actually are when you go through these kinds of journeys. But I've seen these at all the organizations I've worked for, that actually some of this mundane stuff is hugely important. Piece of advice, get a fixer in. There's no point hiring 100 engineers and not having somebody who can actually make their machines work. So just have somebody who's on point to just make all that stuff go away. Makes a big deal. And then, of course, it's helping it sort of add up to something. Making this whole thing join together is actually quite difficult, and making all of these things work in harmony. And that's where we've had some help from Thoughtworks in that regard. One of the things I would say about this is that the whole sort of lean principles are actually very interesting in here, because when you start to organize around your customer and you start to kind of think about what you do for the customer and organize your business that way, you actually do start to become more efficient, because actually you're removing kind of waste from the chain, if you think of that in kind of lean principles. So whilst if you get too obsessed with cost saving as an end in of itself, that can be negative. I actually think that going on this journey can make a big difference to your efficiency, because you start working out what your business actually does. And we have a phrase actually inside our business where people talk about, are we doing business with ourselves or are we doing things for our customers? And it's amazing how often you can see that you've got a team that's sole purpose is to talk to another team, and somewhere in there you've missed the fact that we should be doing things for our customer. So actually I think it's amazing how much kind of saving you can actually find just through adopting these principles. And so forth. So, where have we got to? I'll flip through some of this quite quickly. So, making big progress on the data agenda, making big progress particularly on how we use data to better market to our customers, to better understand their behavior. Had a huge amount of success, using things like AI to understand and predict lapsing rates and try to understand how we can influence customers, providing them relevant offers at points where they're going to lapse. I could give you 10 other of those kinds of examples, but that's the kind of area where we're starting to see progress in our business using data. And then across user experience, we've started a lot of that agile, organize around the customer and the customer journey at the front end. Partly because that's sort of easiest for the organization, and partly because you can most visibly and quickly see the benefits and score wins. And there's one example here of iterations to our product page that have improved conversion. Again, lots and lots of benefits in that area, from regular and frequent change, quick to test, quick to fail as well, which we do, but quick to iterate. So that's a very good place to start, and it's very easy to bring that to life for the organization. Look what we've done for our customer, and then over time you can say, well, actually, this other part of the organization that serves this part of the organization also does serve the customer. You can start aligning around it. So that's where we've made progress. It's hard. It is hard. This is not easy. It is possible, but it is not easy. The one thing I would say here is that massive amounts of change, and that's why engagement is so important, because actually you can't change your organization in one go to work this way, and we haven't. We are doing it in stages and phases. Some areas of our organization look really modern and agile, some of them don't yet. But you end up with a lot of change. So engagement is hugely important. Just general engagement, buy into the company's mission, but also engagement in that kind of transformational journey. So that makes a huge difference. Training, I've talked about skills, getting people to work in different ways, getting different people. Leadership. There's two aspects I'll call on here. One is that leadership of change, because actually leading people through change is hard. We're going to have another reorganization. We're going to move people around. We're going to, etc. That's difficult. That requires a certain type of leadership. The other thing I would say here is that whole piece around changing that whole, you're at the top of the organization to you're a servant of the organization. I think there's a lot of people, of my age or so forth, who've gone through business thinking, I'm going to get to the top and I'm going to be able to lead stuff. And now actually it turns out that you're not really leading stuff, you're facilitating brilliant people who are close to the customer to make the decisions. And that's a mindset shift, and you have to work quite hard on that. And I think that's a really important piece of the puzzle. But not easy, but absolutely doable. And I guess the one thing I would say is that you've got to get everyone joined up, but you've also just got to get started. There isn't a Gantt chart in our business that says we will be finished and transformed on this day. Hopefully what there is a sense that we are more agile, we are better for our customer, we are faster and so forth, faster than we were 2 weeks ago, better than we were 2 weeks ago. And if you can kind of build that cadence, then you start to see belief. So I think it's okay if you don't know the exact hill, but I think you need to know the general direction. Then you just need to start doing things and start trying stuff and all buy into it. Because if you aren't all bought into it at a senior level of the organization, then you will struggle to get the traction. But that would be some of my advice. Okay? Thank you very much for listening. I'll be around afterwards if anybody wants to ask me anything, and hand back to Ruth. Thank you very much.